So imagine you're sitting at your desk, right? And you're watching a coworker organize this massive, incredibly complex financial spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah. Like the ones that look like the Matrix.
Exactly. Like they aren't even breaking a sweat. Their fingers are just flying across the keyboard. All these formulas are linking up flawlessly, and they look, I don't know, completely at peace.
Mm-hmm. In the zone.
Right. Meanwhile, you're sitting at the desk right next to them, and you're struggling just to format a single column so the dates don't look like a phone number.
Oh, the absolute worst.
It is. And what is the very first thing you tell yourself in that moment? Because it's rarely, wow, they have a lot of practice with Excel. Usually it's this really quiet, sinking internal voice that says, there is something fundamentally broken inside me. Like I am lacking something that everyone else seems to have.
Yeah. It's a devastatingly common feeling. We watch someone naturally command a crowded room at a networking event or, assemble a piece of complicated furniture without even glancing at the
Which
instructions.
is basically a superpower, let's be real.
Right. But we immediately internalize our own struggle with those tasks as this deep personal deficit. We don't view it as just a difference in skill set. We view it as a core character flaw.
And that is exactly what we are dismantling today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring this fascinating psychological framework today that, well, it fundamentally shifts how we measure human potential.
It really does. It completely flips the script.
Yeah, it centers around this concept of 12 distinct intelligence types. And the mission today is incredibly practical. We are going to take the specific things you, the listener, perceive as your biggest personal flaws or weaknesses, and we are going to completely reframe them.
Because by the end of this conversation, the goal is really for you to understand the actual mechanics of how your brain is weighted, so you can navigate your career and your relationships with just a lot less friction and, honestly, a lot less guilt.
The guilt is huge.
It is.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, what you have been labeling as a defect your entire life is, well, from a psychological and neurological standpoint, it's merely a different weighting of your natural intelligence. And when you finally understand how those weights are distributed, you literally stop fighting your own biology.
You discover a much more authentic way to operate, right? So, okay, to get us into this mindset, I love this analogy from the text. Think about a toaster.
Oh, yeah, toaster.
Yeah, you are, let's say, a perfectly good, highly functional toaster. You crisp bread beautifully, it's great. But you look around the kitchen countertop and you see a blender over there whipping up this incredibly complex, vibrant green smoothie.
Right, doing all sorts of fancy stuff.
Yeah, and instead of observing that and saying, oh, okay, a blender does a different job, you look at yourself at the toaster and you think, I am a total failure. Like,
Yeah.
I am trying so hard, I am literally vibrating with effort, but I simply cannot make a smoothie. My motor must be defective.
You blame yourself for not being a blender.
Yeah, exactly. Completely ignoring the fact that you possess a heating element designed to do something entirely different.
I mean, it's a slightly humorous analogy, right?
Yeah.
But it maps so perfectly onto human psychology. Because a toaster is obviously not a defective blender.
Right.
It's engineered with a completely different mechanism for a totally different environment.
Right.
Yet, millions of people spend their entire lives in the quote-unquote kitchen of the modern workplace or, the modern school system, ruthlessly beating themselves up for their inability to blend.
It's so sad when you phrase it like that.
It is. When someone struggles with higher-level math or when they experience severe sensory exhaustion after, spending an hour in a loud, crowded restaurant,
Right.
they don't say, oh, I just have a different mechanism.
No, they say, what's wrong with me?
Exactly. They label themselves as defective. They say they have terrible social skills or that they are just lazy and not putting in enough effort.
Ugh, that word effort, we totally weaponize it against ourselves. Like, if I just tried harder, I wouldn't get so overwhelmed at this party. But let's dig into the origin of this. Why is our default setting so self-punishing? Like, when I can't read a map, why is my very first instinct to assume I am a broken human being rather than just assuming I'm a different type of appliance?
Well, to understand why we do this, we really have to look at the yardstick society uses to measure human potential, because it is an incredibly narrow, highly specific metric, and it was formalized largely by the modern educational system.
Okay, so school is to blame.
In a way, yeah. From the very moment you walk into a kindergarten classroom, your potential, your intelligence, and honestly, ultimately your worth are evaluated almost exclusively on just two metrics: linguistic skills and logical mathematical skills.
So reading words and calculating numbers.
Precisely. your ability to manipulate language, so reading, writing, speaking, and your ability to manipulate numbers, recognize abstract logical patterns, solve sequential problems.
Yeah.
And because our educational institutions overwhelmingly reward those two specific areas, this really rigid social hierarchy forms very early on.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Like the smart kids.
Exactly. Yeah. The children who naturally excel in linguistic and logical tasks are labeled excellent. They're funneled into gifted and talented programs.
Right.
Meanwhile, children who interact with the world through movement or through deep emotional intuition or, through visual spatial understanding, they are systematically sidelined.
They're the problem kids, or the ones who just need to apply themselves.
That's exactly. Their primary modes of processing reality aren't just undervalued, they are completely ignored as legitimate forms of intelligence.
Okay, but I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second, because I can hear people shouting at their steering wheels right now.
Go for it.
Aren't those traditional skills, like being able to read effectively or write a coherent email, do basic arithmetic, aren't those objectively the most important skills for survival? I mean, we live in a society built on contracts, budgets, and written communication. If you can't read a lease agreement or calculate your monthly expenses, you are going to be in serious objective trouble. So is the school system actually wrong to use this single yardstick? Or is it just preparing us for the reality of a text and numbers world?
That's the exact defense often used to maintain the status quo. And it touches on a very real necessity, right? Yes, linguistic and logical skills are non-negotiable for basic survival in the modern infrastructure. You absolutely must be able to read and do basic math so you aren't exploited.
Right. Nobody wants to be scammed.
Exactly. But we have to look at why that infrastructure exists in the first place. This two-pronged yardstick didn't just fall out of the sky. It was largely solidified during the Industrial Revolution.
Wait, really? The Industrial Revolution dictated how we measure intelligence.
Absolutely. Think about what the economy needed in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It didn't need millions of deeply introspective philosophers, right? Or brilliant dancers.
No, it needed factory workers.
Exactly. It needed a massive standardized workforce of factory managers, clerks, administrators, people who could read instructional manuals, keep financial ledgers, and follow logical sequential procedures. The school system was literally redesigned to mass-produce that specific cognitive profile.
Oh, wow.
So yes, these skills are required to survive in the system we built.
So we basically built a world that specifically requires blenders, and now we are testing everything to see how well it blends.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And here is the critical distinction. Surviving in an industrialized economic system is not the same thing as thriving as a human being.
So true.
Society has made this massive categorical error. We took a baseline survival metric, the minimum reading and math required to function in an economy, and we falsely elevated it to be the ultimate measure of a person's total cognitive capability and their inherent worth.
Yeah, like if you're bad at math, you're just a bad person somehow.
Right. Just because a skill makes you economically useful in an office doesn't mean it represents the entirety of human genius. By only measuring words and numbers, we are essentially walking into a massive, diverse forest and declaring that the only valuable trees are the ones that grow perfectly straight and can be easily cut into lumber.
Oh, man.
We completely ignore the trees that bear fruit, the ones that create complex root systems to prevent soil erosion, or the ones that provide canopy shade.
That framing, that completely shifts how I look at those standardized tests we all had to take. We aren't testing for genius. We are testing for a very specific type of utilitarian lumber.
Exactly.
So, okay, if this single yardstick is fundamentally flawed and creating all this unnecessary shame, what is the alternative? How should we be evaluating ourselves?
Well, we need to adopt a psychological framework that dramatically expands our definition of cognition. And this is rooted in the theory of multiple intelligences.
Right, which was Howard Gardner's thing, right?
Right. Yes. Originally pioneered by Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner. But it's been expanded upon over the years by cognitive scientists to encompass 12 distinct types of intelligence. And this framework obliterates the idea that human ability is a single static numerical score.
Like an IQ test.
Right, where you score 115 and that permanently defines your brain power for the rest of your life. Instead, it proves that human ability is a highly complex, nuanced combination of multiple independent cognitive processors.
Okay, let's unpack these processors. Because I'll be honest, when I hear the word intelligence, I still have a very stubborn image in my head of like a guy standing in front of a chalkboard solving a calculus
A
equation.
Goodwill Hunting image.
Exactly. So if we are expanding the definition to 12 types, what actually qualifies as an intelligence?
It's important to define what we mean by intelligence here, because it's not just being good at a hobby. It is a specific biological and psychological capacity to process information in a certain way, to solve problems or create products. So beyond the linguistic and logical mathematical processors we already discussed, you have spatial intelligence.
Which is what exactly? Like packing a car.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
Spatial intelligence is how your brain understands, manipulates, and navigates the physical three-dimensional world. It's the ability to visualize shapes in your mind, to mentally rotate objects, and to understand complex visual patterns.
Okay, got it.
Then you have bodily kinesthetic intelligence.
Wait, I'm stuck on something here. If we say bodily movement is an intelligence, aren't we just kind of watering down the word intelligence so everybody gets a participation trophy?
Heading.
Like, oh, you aren't good at math, but you can throw a baseball really far, so you're a genius too. Isn't that just a physical reflex?
That is a very common criticism, for sure, but it ignores the actual neurology behind it. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is not just raw muscle mass or a knee-jerk reflex. It is highly advanced cognition happening through movement. Yes. Think of a surgeon performing a microscopic procedure, or a mechanic who can diagnose a subtle engine issue just by feeling the vibration in their hands.
Raw.
Or, an elite athlete mapping the trajectory of a ball while calculating the velocity of 3 other players around them in real time.
Oh.
That requires immense, rapid-fire neurological processing. The brain is calculating physics, spatial geometry, and timing simultaneously. Just because the output is physical rather than written down on a test paper doesn't make it any less cognitive.
Okay, I totally stand corrected on that. I never thought about it like that. The output is physical, but the processing is intensely mental. What else is on the board?
So we have musical intelligence, which involves a profound sensitivity to pitch, rhythm, tone, and the mathematical structures of sound. We have naturalistic intelligence, the ability to recognize, categorize, and draw upon features of the environment.
Which was probably a crucial cognitive skill for human survival before grocery stores existed.
Oh, absolutely vital. And then we move into the deeply personal spheres. There is interpersonal intelligence, which is the capacity to read the intentions, motivations, and desires of other people. It's high-level empathy and social navigation.
So like a master negotiator or an incredible therapist.
Exactly. And the flip side of that is intrapersonal intelligence. This is the capacity to look inward. It is the ability to understand your own complex emotional landscapes, to accurately regulate your inner life, and to align your behaviors with your deepest values. It's self-awareness on a very profound level.
That sounds exhausting but useful.
It's very powerful. And finally, the framework encompasses existential intelligence, which is the cognitive capacity to grapple with deep, fundamental questions of human existence, meaning, life, and death.
Okay, so to picture all of this, the image that instantly comes to my mind is an audio equalizer in a high-end recording studio. Or if you play video games, think of a character creation screen where you have all those stat sliders.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you don't just have one master volume knob labeled good at life. You have a massive soundboard. You have a slider for linguistic ability, a slider for spatial reasoning, a slider for bodily kinesthetics.
Yes.
And if you put on a pair of headphones and the audio track sounds a bit muddy and you realize the treble slider is pushed all the way down, you don't throw the whole stereo in the trash and say, this machine is entirely broken.
Right, you don't panic.
You just recognize that it is currently tuned to produce a very bass-heavy sound.
That is a brilliant mechanical analogy. Because what this cognitive framework tells us is that struggling with a specific task does not mean your machinery is defective. It simply means that on your personal equalizer board, that specific intelligence has a lighter weighting.
It's just a slider that's set lower.
Exactly. It is a slider that is naturally set a bit lower, while other sliders are pushed way up. And the crucial takeaway here is that having sliders with a lighter weighting is the fundamental reality of human biology. Nobody, absolutely nobody, has every single slider pushed to the absolute maximum.
Why not?
The brain simply does not have the metabolic energy to sustain genius-level processing in all 12 domains simultaneously. It would fry the circuits.
That is incredibly liberating. Honestly, it just strips away all the moral judgment we attach to our struggles. Like, if I'm bad at math, it's not a failure of my character, it's just a different setting on my neurological board.
Precisely.
Let's make this really concrete, though. If we take these 12 sliders and look at how they interact in the real world, what does it actually look like? Let's talk about a specific profile. What about someone whose sliders are pushed way up for intrapersonal intelligence and linguistic intelligence?
Okay, let's examine that person. This is someone who processes the world internally and verbally. They are constantly analyzing their own thoughts. They love deep self-reflection. They're likely drawn to writing or journaling as a way to untangle complex ideas.
I know people exactly like this.
And they thrive in intense one-on-one conversations. They are fundamentally driven to understand the why behind their own emotions and the emotions of those very close to them. Now, put that person in a modern corporate office with an open floor plan.
Oh, no.
Right. An environment where success is dictated by loud brainstorming sessions, massive group meetings, and constant breezy networking.
It's a complete mismatch. And I know exactly how that person gets labeled by management. If you don't want to go to the Friday happy hour with 50 people and you'd rather sit quietly in your desk writing a detailed strategy document, you get branded as antisocial.
Exactly.
You're told you aren't a team player or that you lack communication skills.
Yes. Society slaps a deeply negative, pathologizing label on them because their behavior isn't matching the extroverted, broadly interpersonal demands of that specific environment. But if we reframe this through the intelligence equalizer, we see something completely different.
What do we see?
This person does not have a deficit in sociability. They are not broken. In fact, they have a profoundly strong capacity for connection. Their interpersonal intelligence is a massive cognitive strength. They are uniquely equipped to synthesize complex emotional data and write with striking clarity.
So it's a feature, not a bug.
It is a feature, not a bug. They just operate on a different bandwidth. They crave high-resolution, targeted connection, whereas the office environment demands low-resolution, broadcast-level small talk.
Wow, I love that phrase. High-resolution connection versus broadcast-level small talk. It completely changes the narrative from I'm weird and bad at parties to my social processor is designed for deep dives, not shallow waiting.
Exactly.
But what about the other side of the coin? Because there are things that are undeniably frustrating. Let's talk about the spatial and logical struggles. The people who absolutely cannot do mental math, or who constantly get lost, or who can't pack a trunk because they can't visualize how the suitcases fit together.
This is where people feel the most shame, because spatial and logical deficits are very visible to other people. When someone struggles to read a map or can't calculate a tip in their head at a restaurant, the immediate assumption from everyone around them is cognitive failure.
Yeah, they just think you're dumb.
Right. But the neurological reality is that for these individuals, their development in spatial or logical processing simply has a more gradual curve. The slider is set lower.
But let's dig into that biology for a second. What does a lower slider actually mean in the brain? Like physically, why do I get lost in my own neighborhood?
Okay, so navigation relies heavily on a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which contains specialized neurons known as place cells and grid cells.
Place cells and grid cells?
Right. These cells literally create a firing pattern that maps your physical environment. For someone with high spatial intelligence, this network fires robustly and quickly, creating an immediate three-dimensional mental map.
They just know where north is.
Exactly. For someone with a lighter weighting in spatial intelligence, that specific neural network might be less dense, or it might just require more conscious, deliberate effort to activate. It doesn't mean they can't learn to navigate. It just means it is not their brain's primary automated mode of processing reality.
So it takes more juice.
Yes. It requires intense metabolic energy for them to do what someone else does on autopilot.
But see, this is where the theory hits the reality of a Tuesday morning. If someone is terrible at reading maps, their friends casually call them directionally challenged.
Right, which sounds harmless.
But it's usually phrased as a joke, and there is a sharp undertone of incompetence there. So if we truly accept this is just a biological slider setting, how does that actually change the lived experience of a person who is, right now, sitting in their car, completely lost, trying to find a new coffee shop and starting to panic?
It changes the entire internal monologue of that moment. If you believe your lack of spatial awareness is a core defect, getting lost triggers a catastrophic cascade of negative self-talk.
Oh yeah, the spiral.
You grip the steering wheel and think, I'm an idiot. I can't do anything right. Everyone else could use a map. Why am I so stupid?
Your cortisol spikes, your fight or flight system activates, and by the time you finally arrive at the coffee shop, you are stressed, angry, and cognitively exhausted.
You've essentially ruined your own morning before it even started.
Precisely. But if you view that exact same situation through the lens of multiple intelligences, the shame evaporates. You take a wrong turn, and your internal monologue is objective. You think, oh, right, my spatial slider is naturally low. This specific task requires more conscious energy for my hippocampus than it does for other people. I'm going to pull over, take a breath, and just rely on the GPS step by step.
It's neutral.
Exactly. It's neutral. You recognize the struggle as a mechanical reality of your specific intelligence weighting. You stop attacking your core worth as a human being.
It's the difference between saying my engine is broken and saying my car is built for off-roading, so I'm going to stay on the paved highway.
Yeah, so
You
good.
preserve so much emotional energy, and preserving that energy is absolutely vital for utilizing the intelligences where your sliders are pushed up.
Okay, this brings us to a massive foundational question. If my brain is essentially this complex audio equalizer, and my spatial slider is low while my linguistic slider is high, at what point did those sliders get locked into place?
That's $1 million question.
Right. Is this something my parents handed down to me in my DNA, or did my third-grade teacher push my math slider down because she yelled at me in front of the class? Are we talking about nature or nurture here?
You're touching on one of the most heavily researched questions in all of psychology, and the answer is a fascinating synthesis of both.
Okay.
To understand this, we have to look at the mechanisms revealed by decades of twin studies. These studies, particularly those tracking monozygotic or identical twins who were separated at birth and raised in completely different environments, they are the absolute gold standard for isolating the genetic variable from the environmental variable.
Because they have the exact same factory hardware, but they were shipped to different operating environments.
Exactly. And what these studies conclusively prove is that genetics absolutely provide a concrete foundation. We do inherit a baseline neurological architecture. We inherit specific sensitivities. You might be genetically predisposed to a high sensitivity to sound or, a rapid processing speed for logical patterns, or very reactive baseline in how you emotionally engage with others.
So the equalizer board itself and the default factory settings of the sliders are indeed baked into our biology.
Yes, the capacity is genetic, but, and this is the most crucial nuance, that genetic foundation does not dictate your destiny. Your DNA does not contain a predetermined mandate that says you will be a concert pianist or you will be an accountant.
So what does dictate it?
The environment you grow up in, the cultural context, the resources available to you, and the specific experiences you have. That is what takes the raw genetic sensitivity and shapes it into an actual applied intelligence.
Walk me through a concrete example of this. How does one specific genetic trait morph into different intelligences based on the environment?
Okay, let's take the trait of high sensory sensitivity, specifically auditory and pattern sensitivity. Imagine a parent who possesses this trait and expresses it through a profound musical intelligence. They are a professional cellist. They pass this exact genetic baseline down to their child. Now, if that child is raised in a home filled with instruments where they taught to read sheet music at age 4, that underlying genetic sensitivity will very likely lock in as musical intelligence.
That makes perfect sense. The apple doesn't fall far from the cello. But what if that identical child is adopted by a family of writers who don't listen to music at all?
This is where it gets extraordinary. That same underlying genetic sensitivity, the acute awareness of pitch, rhythm, and pattern, it doesn't just disappear. The brain repurposes it based on environmental input.
Really?
Yes. In a house full of writers, that auditory sensitivity might tune itself to the rhythm and cadence of language. They might develop incredibly high linguistic intelligence, becoming a poet who writes with a highly musical rhythmic structure.
Same hardware, totally different software installation.
Precisely. Or imagine they are raised in a highly volatile emotional environment where they have to constantly monitor the mood of the adults around them just to stay safe.
Oh, wow.
That exact same biological sensitivity to subtle changes in pitch and tone might be hijacked for survival. It manifests as profound interpersonal intelligence. They learn to hear the slight tension in someone's voice, reading emotional frequencies with terrifying accuracy. It is the exact same genetic foundation, a highly sensitive neurological processor, but the environment dictated the ultimate manifestation.
It's like being handed a block of marble. Genetics dictates the properties of the marble. It gives you the size, the density, the grain. You can't carve a wooden ship out of a block of marble. You are bound by the material.
Right.
But your environment, the people you meet, the traumas you face, the passions you pursue, they are the sculptors holding the chisel. They decide what the final statue actually looks like.
That is the perfect visualization. Genetics provides the material limitations and the latent potential. but the environment is the artist. And realizing this is deeply empowering.
Why is it empowering?
Because while you cannot change the underlying genetic density of your marble, you have enormous agency over your environment as an adult. If you find yourself in a situation that is carving your marble into a shape that causes you pain, you have the ability to pick up your block and move it to a different studio.
Which perfectly transitions us to the most painful part of this whole dynamic. Because if we are all these unique, beautiful statues with very specific cognitive weightings, why is everyone so utterly exhausted all the time? Like, why is burnout the defining psychological characteristic of our era?
We are exhausted because we are caught in a massive psychological trap. And that trap is the relentless, socially mandated drive to, quote-unquote, overcome our weaknesses. We live in a culture that fetishizes being well-rounded.
Yes, the well-rounded ideal. We are told we need to be a great public speaker, highly organized, emotionally intelligent, data-driven, and physically fit, all at the exact same time.
And it violates the fundamental laws of cognitive thermodynamics. Yeah, remember, the brain has a finite amount of metabolic energy. So many of us spend massive amounts of that precious energy, our time, and our emotional bandwidth, trying to drag our natural deficits up to a socially acceptable baseline. We take a slider that is biologically set at a 2, and we use sheer willpower to manually hold it at a 5 all day, every day.
And doing that requires constant tension. If my toaster is trying to blend ice by just vibrating really hard, the motor is going to overheat and catch fire.
Exactly. The psychological toll of hyper-focusing on our deficits is immense. We do seminars, we read self-help books, and we grind through tasks we hate, all to achieve mediocrity in an area we just aren't wired for.
Just to be average.
Right. And the tragedy is, this constant striving drains the very energy reserves you need to actually utilize your true strengths. If you spend 90% of your cognitive battery trying to be average at a weakness, you only have 10% left to apply to the areas where your sliders are naturally at a 9. You rob the world of your genius because you are so obsessed with hiding your flaws.
Okay, so if the well-rounded ideal is a trap, what is the alternative? Because I imagine the solution isn't just to lay on the couch and say, I'm bad at this, someone else do it.
The radical alternative is strategic delegation and environmental design. You have to evaluate the return on investment of your life energy.
Okay, how so?
Putting 100 hours of agonizing effort into a cognitive weakness might move you from poor to slightly below average. But putting those same 100 hours into your natural high-weighted strength could propel you from good to world class.
That's a huge difference.
Right. If you are a brilliant writer with high linguistic intelligence, but you struggle immensely with bodily kinesthetic and interpersonal performance, meaning you get panic attacks when public speaking, you shouldn't spend years torturing yourself in Toastmasters just to become a mediocre speaker.
So what should you do instead? Just never speak?
You design a life that leverages the written word. You find a career path, or you build a business that is entirely driven by text, reports, or asynchronous communication. And for the moments where speaking is absolutely required, you partner with someone who has high interpersonal and kinesthetic intelligence, but perhaps struggles with writing. You create a symbiotic ecosystem. You write their speeches, and they deliver your ideas. You allow yourself to be supported by the complementary strengths of others.
I have to push back here, though. This sounds beautiful in theory, this utopian ecosystem of complementary strengths, but let's bring it down to earth.
Sure.
Isn't this advice potentially a recipe for irresponsibility? Like, I might have a very low logical mathematical slider, but it's April, and I still have to do my taxes. I still have to pay my bills. I still have to organize my calendar so I don't miss my kid's dentist appointment.
Very true.
I can't just call the IRS and say, I'm sorry, I am a highly interpersonal linguistic processor, so I will not be participating in this spreadsheet.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly.
We still have to function as adults. So how do we balance this advice to lean into our strengths with the mundane, unavoidable chores of life?
That is the essential tension. And it is a vital clarification to make. No psychological framework excuses you from basic adult function. You absolutely still have to do your taxes.
Okay, good.
The critical difference lies not in what tasks you avoid, but in where you place your identity and where you invest your striving.
Identity and striving. Okay, I need you to break that down. Are you saying I should just stop caring about the things I'm bad at?
I am saying you need to emotionally detach your self-worth from them. Doing your taxes or organizing a basic calendar is a baseline functional requirement. You use tools to manage it. You buy intuitive software, you set up auto pay, or if you have the resources, you hire an accountant. You construct a scaffolding around your weakness to meet the minimum societal requirement, and then this is the key, you move on. You don't ruminate on it.
So the trap isn't the act of doing the taxes.
No, the trap is the ego. The trap would be having a low logical intelligence, waiting, feeling deep shame about it, and then deciding that you need to take night classes in advanced accounting just to quote-unquote prove to yourself and the world that you aren't flawed.
Oh, wow. I see people do that all the time.
The burnout happens when we make overcoming our weaknesses our primary life goal. We view the struggle as a moral imperative. What this framework urges us to do is shift our striving. Build a bridge over your weaknesses so they don't sink your ship, but invest your deep, passionate, identity-level energy into your strengths.
That distinction between building a functional bridge over a weakness versus trying to build a mansion on top of it, that is profound. It gives me permission to just be okay at certain things without feeling like a failure.
Exactly.
But this brings us to a very practical hurdle. If I'm listening to this right now and I'm totally on board, I want to stop fighting my weaknesses and lean into my strengths. How do I actually figure out what my strengths are?
That's the next step, yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people have been suppressing their natural sliders for so long to fit into the workplace that they don't even know what their equalizer looks like anymore. Do we need to go to a psychologist and take a massive battery of diagnostic tests?
Not at all. Formal tests can be interesting, but they aren't necessary. The most accurate way to discover your true cognitive shape is through a process we can call everyday archaeology.
Everyday archaeology.
You map your intelligence weighting by acting as an objective observer of your own mundane daily habits. Your brain is constantly leaving clues about its preferred processing pathways. You just have to know where to look.
So brushing the dust off our daily routines, where do we start digging?
There are 3 specific questions you can ask yourself to uncover your cognitive baseline. The first is, what do you naturally think about when you are completely alone, unprompted, and undistracted? When you are in the shower or staring out the window on a train, where does your default network go?
Because that is the brain operating without any external pressure.
Exactly. Without a boss or a teacher telling it what to do, what does it choose to process? Does your mind go to designing a physical space, visualizing how to rearrange the furniture in your living room? That points heavily to spatial intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
Does your mind replay a conversation you had, analyzing the subtle emotional undertones of what a friend said? That is interpersonal. Do you naturally hum or construct melodies in your head? That's musical. Track where your mind wanders when it's off the leash.
Okay, so tracking the default state. What is the second question?
The second question is perhaps the most revealing regarding our metabolic energy. What activities actually restore your energy when you are profoundly exhausted? If you have had a terrible, draining week at work, what is the activity that actually plugs you back into the wall and makes you feel human again?
Oh, this is a great metric. Because it separates what we like doing from what actually sustains us neurologically.
Precisely. Many people like watching television, but it acts as a numbing agent, not a restorative one. If you are burned out, do you feel an overwhelming biological need to go for a long, intense run? That points to a high bodily kinesthetic weighting. Your brain literally processes stress and re-regulates itself through physical movement.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Or do you need to sit in absolute silence with a journal and dissect your internal state? That's intrapersonal. Do you need to get out of the city and immerse yourself in a forest, feeling grounded by the complex systems of biology? That's naturalistic intelligence.
And the third question.
What conversation topics make you completely lose track of time? When are you so deeply engaged in a flow state that you forget to check your phone, forget you are hungry, and just exist purely in the exchange of ideas? Are you debating the ethical implications of artificial intelligence? That heavily involves existential and logical processors. Are you dissecting the plot structure of a novel? Linguistic.
It's funny because as you list these out, they seem so obvious. But it is incredibly easy to overlook our own highest weightings precisely because they feel too natural to us.
We just take them for granted.
Yeah, it reminds me of that classic David Foster Wallace joke about the 2 young fish swimming along. An older fish swims past them, nods, and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the heck is water?"
It is the perfect metaphor.
Oh.
We do not notice our own baseline intelligences because we have been swimming in them every single second of our lives. We commit a massive cognitive bias.
Mm.
We assume that because something is incredibly easy and fluid for us, it must be easy for everyone else.
Oh, that is so true.
We devalue our own genius because it doesn't require agonizing effort. We think, oh, anyone can read a room and tell that the boss is in a bad mood, or anyone can visualize how to pack the car efficiently.
And then we get frustrated when our partner can't do it.
Exactly. We project our equalizer onto them. That is why making these micro-observations through everyday archaeology is so powerful. But observation isn't enough. You must write these observations down.
Why is writing them down so critical? Can't I just think about it?
Because of how the brain treats abstract thoughts. When thoughts just float vaguely in our working memory, they lack structural permanence. We dismiss them as random daydreaming. But the physical act of writing engages the frontoparietal network of the brain.
The frontoparietal network.
Yes, it forces you to take abstract data, synthesize it, and encode it into concrete linguistic symbols. By writing down, I lost track of time for 3 hours today organizing the visual layout of my garden, or I felt deeply recharged after having an intense philosophical debate with my sister, you are creating a permanent data point. You are literally drawing the map of your equalizer.
You are making the invisible water visible.
Yes. And once you can clearly see that map, you can begin the process of environmental design. You can start making small, conscious, strategic choices to increase the percentage of time you spend utilizing your highest sliders.
And this doesn't require a catastrophic life change, right? I don't have to quit my corporate job tomorrow and move to a cabin in the woods just because I realized I have a high naturalistic intelligence.
Not at all. It is entirely about micro-adjustments within your current reality. If you map your equalizer and realize you have exceptional linguistic intelligence, but your current role has you trapped in spreadsheets, you don't necessarily quit. You volunteer to draft the company newsletter. You offer to write the copy for the new marketing campaign. Or if you discover a high interpersonal weighting, you suggest shifting your weekly team update from a dry email chain to a quick, collaborative video call where you can actually read people's faces and guide the group dynamic.
You slowly tilt the environment to favor your biology.
Precisely. By making these micro-adjustments, you gradually align your daily tasks with your natural neurological weightings. And when you do that, the friction of daily life plummets. You experience a fundamental shift in your baseline sense of well-being, competence, and achievement.
Which brings us full circle right back to the promise at the beginning of this deep dive. It literally makes your heart lighter, because you are finally swimming with the current instead of thrashing against it. You stop fighting the toaster, and you just start making amazing toast.
If we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, from the history of the industrial yardstick to the 12 intelligences, to the mechanics of twin studies and the trap of burnout, the core truth is this. If you wake up feeling like you're constantly failing, or if you feel like life is just a relentless, painful uphill battle, it almost certainly does not mean you lack ability. It means your current environment, your job, your routines, or the expectations you have internalized are fundamentally mismatched with your unique cognitive architecture. This framework of 12 intelligences is not just another personality test or a set of rigid boxes to trap yourself in. It is a detailed map to help you navigate your way out of the box that society forced you into.
A map to find your way out. That is deeply profound. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, and I want to sincerely thank you, the listener, for coming on this deep dive with us. I know this is a massive paradigm shift to process, but I truly hope it brings you a profound sense of relief and a new lens through which to view your own capabilities.
The ultimate value of understanding this psychology is not just in the knowing, but in the application. It's about changing how you operate tomorrow morning.
Absolutely. So before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over this week, something to push this concept even further. We've talked a lot about individual realization, but imagine the collective impact. If our personal struggles are truly just a mismatch between our unique intelligence profile and our environment, imagine what society would look like if our educational systems and our corporate workplaces were designed from day one to combine our complementary strengths.
That would be incredible.
Right. What if, instead of forcing everyone through the exact same industrial mold, we built teams based on interlocking cognitive weightings? Think back to our kitchen. What if the toaster and the blender simply shared the same counter, utilizing the same electricity to create a complete breakfast instead of competing to see who is better at making a smoothie? Take a hard look at the one flaw you have been relentlessly beating yourself up over this past week. What if that exact trait, that lower slider on your equalizer, is not a defect at all? What if it is simply making neurological room for a massive strength, the exact missing puzzle piece that someone else is desperately looking for. Until next time, keep exploring.